If you fix this engine, I'll marry you." The CEO's laugh sliced through the workshop like a blade. Raphael lifted his head, hands covered in grease, his old shirt glued to his skin from the heat of the compressor. Rain drummed nervously on the tin roof, and every drop that fell into a bucket made an annoying plink, marking each second of humiliation. The car in front of him was a black Mercedes, hood open like a wounded mouth full of pride. Beside it stood 3 men in suits and a security guard with cold eyes. In the center, Eduardo Monteiro, tall, expensive watch, that crooked grin of someone who enjoys stepping on others. "Say that again," Raphael said, gripping the screwdriver like it was his own dignity. Eduardo turned to the small audience in the shop. 2 trainees, an old lady waiting for her van, and a parts seller holding a box of spark plugs. "I said if this—" He looked at the sign with uneven letters. "Rafa Motors Garage. Junk artist here does what 9 official dealers couldn't. I'll marry him." He laughed. "But bring flowers, all right?" The suits laughed loud. One whispered something, and they all looked anywhere but at Raphael's face, as if shame could spread like a disease. The security guard didn't laugh. He just brushed his jacket aside, showing an empty holster. A silent threat. Raphael took a deep breath. The smell of burnt oil, wet rust, stale coffee, a distant motorcycle speeding on the avenue. Inside his chest, anger and calm fought for space. He touched the engine with his fingertips, listening quietly, feeling the heat, the smell, the tiny tremors that told him where the problem lived. "Got the manual?" he asked without looking at Eduardo. "Manuals are for people who can't think," one of the engineers replied. Thin beard, metallic arrogance in his tone. "That engine was built not to break." "Then it's worse than I thought," Raphael said, wiping his hands on a faded rag. The old lady coughed softly. "Don't mind them, son. You've fixed tougher things before. Mrs. Odette, go sit down and grab some coffee," Raphael whispered. "This one's going to take a while." Eduardo took 2 steps closer, invading Raphael's space, his woody perfume pushing out the smell of grease. "Here's the deal. 24 hours. If this car doesn't drive out of here brand new, I'll make sure city inspectors check every license, every screw in this shack." He laid a card on the workbench. A direct line, a number that looked like it belonged to a safe. "And if by some miracle it works, I'll take you out to dinner. You and your sculptor's hands." Raphael glanced at the card for a second, then pushed it back with the screwdriver. "I don't dine with people who despise labor. I just work. The rest is silence." One of the trainees, Davi, 17, cap turned backward, stepped closer. "Want me to shut the gate, Rafa?" "Leave it open," Raphael said, lifting the hood completely. "Those who humiliate in public learn in public." A tense silence. The rain grew heavier, as if the whole city wanted to listen. Raphael began with what everyone ignored, the basics. Tested the battery, checked the alternator, fuses, wiring harness. The old shop scanner spat out strange codes. Not a usual failure. He turned the key. The engine coughed, trembled, died. Once, twice. On the 3rd try, a subtle click, the kind only trained ears could catch. "You hear that?" he asked Davi. Sounded like a click behind, deep by the firewall. "Yeah," Eduardo scoffed. "They already tried all that. The problem's beyond your little screwdriver, buddy." "Everything they tried was wrong," Raphael said calmly. "When you start with arrogance, you end up blind." The bearded engineer stepped forward. "There's a control module only the factory can access. And whoever installed it wrong," Raphael replied, "or wanted it to fail." Eduardo's eyes narrowed, barely, but enough. The guard noticed, shifting his stance closer to his boss. Raphael placed both hands on the cold metal, feeling the leftover vibrations like reading Braille. There was a fake rhythm hidden inside that flawless engine design. He removed the plastic cover, checked the voltage in 3 spots, frowned. "Davy, flashlight. Straight light here." The beam sliced through the dust in the air. Perfect wires, brand new clips, everything too neat, too staged, like a bed made by someone who never slept there. Raphael dug the tip of his screwdriver into a clear clamp. "This part's new." Premium inspection, the engineer sang. Preventive maintenance, or cover-up, Raphael said. Whoever worked on this rushed to hide something else. Eduardo exaggeratedly looked at his watch. Tell me, Grease poet, do you fix or give speeches? Raphael closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered another garage, another life, the phone call that cost him his job. You're poking into big stuff. The door closing on the meeting room, the signature on the dismissal paper, the name Eduardo Monteiro, director back then. Same smirk. He opened his eyes. I fix things, but I don't rush. Only cowards rush. The old lady smiled faintly. The parts seller, pretending to scroll his phone, recorded everything quietly. Raphael walked to his tool cart and took out a small metal case, corners dented. His father's old toolbox, a legacy of calloused hands. Inside was an old handheld tester probe, its plastic yellowed with age. It wasn't pretty, but it told the truth. He connected it to a specific point in the wiring harness, rerouted a wire on the outside, wrapped it with tape, and turned the key again. The engine tried to catch its breath, failed once more. Not yet, he muttered. How long do you need? Eduardo pressed, impatient. Long enough to do it right, he answered. And doing things right never comes with a deadline for humiliation. Davi followed as he leaned deeper under the hood. What are you looking for? A mistake in the sequence everyone repeats without thinking. He pointed. See that connector? Looks original, but the clip's aftermarket. It went unnoticed because it's pricey, well made. But the fit delays the signal by a millisecond. 1 millisecond, Davi. It's like blinking during a symphony. Nobody sees it, but the music goes off key. Who would do that? Davi whispered. Raphael didn't answer. He loosened the connector, repositioned it, and locked it in place with that perfect click only someone who knows the sound can make. Then he wiped a thin layer of grease from around the grounding point, tested continuity. The probe lit and blinked in a clean rhythm. Try now, Davi asked, eyes shining. Wait, Raphael inhaled deeply. Engines are proud creatures. First, respect, then ignition. Eduardo rolled his eyes. Is this the mystical part of the show? This is the part where you learn that impossible has steps, Raphael replied flatly. He turned the key. The engine gave a long crank, puffed heavy air, and hung right between life and silence. A thread, a breath, an almost. Raphael neither smiled nor frowned. He grabbed a small mirror, slipped it behind the throttle body, saw the inverted reflection, and spotted the missing piece. A tiny seal, slightly out of place. The same hands that fought rusty bolts now handled rubber with a surgeon's care. Now! The key turned. The engine woke up, deep, steady, round. A low growl, smooth and full. The whole garage held its breath. The RPM needle steadied like a heartbeat, finding its rhythm. Even the rain on the roof seemed to ease. Eduardo stood frozen a moment longer than he meant to, then clapped once, slow and mocking. Congrats! You made $1 million car start. Want a medal or a ring? Raphael shut the engine off. The vibration faded, leaving a new kind of courage in the air. He walked up to Eduardo, stopped at a respectful distance, and said clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear, I don't joke about marriage, and I don't bargain with dignity. You came here to humiliate me. Let me teach you something. When the truth starts running, even arrogance listens. The guard took a step forward. Eduardo lifted a hand to stop him. The grin had cracked. 24 hours, he said, pointing to his watch. Just started. They started long ago, Raphael replied, returning to the engine. The moment someone laughs at honest work, the countdown to their fall begins. Mrs. Odette clapped softly. Davi grinned. The parts seller stopped recording, now just watched, filled with quiet respect. Raphael reopened the hood. There was much more to see. Deep down, he felt it. This wasn't just a malfunction. It was a message hidden inside the machine. And he was ready to read it. The rain had stopped, but the smell of wet soil still mixed with burnt oil. Morning broke with distant car horns and the faint buzz of mosquitoes. Raphael hadn't slept. The Mercedes engine lay in pieces across the bench, a silent dissection. Every part told a story. His story was there too, scattered among grease, bolts, and scars. While tightening a screw's torque, he remembered the days of wearing a white coat instead of overalls. A junior engineer at Montero Motors, young, idealistic, full of ideas about cleaner, sustainable engines. He was the one who discovered the scheme, refurbished parts being sold as new with fake inspection reports. He tried to report it internally and quickly learned the cost of integrity. Back then, Eduardo Montero wasn't CEO yet, but he already pulled strings. He was the one who called him into the glass office, the same place where he now met with politicians and investors. "Raphael, learn this," he had said, voice calm and poisonous. "There's no right or wrong, only what's convenient." 2 days later, Raphael's badge stopped working. The company claimed conduct violation. The report disappeared, and his name was erased from the system. The memory still hurt like rust under the skin, but the workshop was his way to keep breathing. There, he repaired not only engines, but his own dignity. "Rafa, coffee?" Davi asked, breaking his thoughts. "No, just water," he said, wiping his face. "Coffee reminds me of meetings. The kind with suits and badges." Raphael nodded, half smiling. "And people talking about ethics while drinking from the company mug." Davi laughed, then got serious. "You think he'll come back? The guy with the Mercedes?" "He will. Arrogant people always return to check if you've failed." "And if he shuts the shop down?" Raphael tightened the screw until it clicked. "Then I'll open another." What they don't get is, the tool stays the same, only the roof changes. A distant thunder rolled. The clock on the wall read 8:30. On the radio, a voice warned of heavy traffic on the main avenue. Raphael didn't even hear them. He was focused. He'd found scratch marks on the exhaust valve, traces of a wrench different from the one used in the factory. Someone had tampered with it on purpose. Someone wanted that engine to die. He grabbed his phone, snapped a picture, and saved it in his notes. Then he typed, "Sabotage pattern identical to 2017 model, Montero Motors." It was almost automatic, instinctive, as if he were still the engineer he once was. Mrs. Odette showed up at the door with a lunchbox. "Brought you lunch?" "Thanks, but it's not time yet." "It is. A man with anger and an empty stomach just ruins bolts." She set the container on the table. Raphael smiled faintly. "I'm not angry, Mrs. Odette." "Yes, you are. You just hide it well." He took a deep breath, not denying it. Across the street, a truck was unloading old tires. The noise clouded his head. Raphael wondered how different his life could have been. He could have been in a lab designing electric engines, but instead he was here, fighting noise, dust, and oblivion. "Rafa," Davi said suddenly, "why don't you sue that guy? Justice that needs a rich lawyer isn't justice. So you're just going to let it go?" Raphael stared at the engine. "Nothing cheap ever lasts, Davi. I prefer expensive, but right." He went back to work. Sunlight crept through holes in the roof, painting bright lines on the floor. Dust floated in the air like suspended memories. Raphael changed the oil, checked the flow, reviewed the ignition system. Everything looked fine, but engines don't lie. There was something hidden, something only someone who understands the soul of machines could sense. He grabbed a scrap of paper and sketched a quick diagram. 3 arrows, a line, a circle. 2 wires swapped, a tiny detail, almost invisible, but enough to destroy everything. It was the same kind of flaw he'd found years ago in the project he tried to expose. Too much of a coincidence. "It's not a defect," he muttered. "It's a signature." "What?" Davi frowned. "Someone wants this engine to fail, but not fast. They want it to stall in the middle of the road with witnesses. Like, to blame someone? Like to prove no one's better than their factory." Raphael stood up, washed his hands, and looked out the window. The black Mercedes gleamed in the yard, proud, arrogant, mocking the humble neighborhood, and he knew that car was just the tip of something much bigger. As she left, Mrs. Odette whispered, "God give you strength, son." "Those people don't play fair," Raphael smiled. "Not with faith, not with fear. I don't play at giving up. The afternoon sank slowly, bathed in gold. He switched on the dim lights of the garage. The fan spun lazily, whining in the corner. He pulled an old notebook from the drawer, a technical diary from his engineer days. There he wrote, "The impossible is just what cowards call what they never try." He closed the notebook. The clock showed 7 in the evening. Then the sound of a car approaching cut through the silence. Raphael wiped his hands on a rag. Through the glass reflection, he saw the outline of high heels stepping out of the car. It wasn't Eduardo. It was a woman, the bride. And without knowing it, she was about to change everything. The black Mercedes still shimmered under the weak shop light, reflecting Raphael's tired face. The echo of her heels hit the concrete floor, and the door shut behind her with a sharp click. "Good evening," she said softly. "You're Raphael, right?" He looked up, wiping his hands with a stained rag. "Yeah, you must be the car's owner." She nodded, a little surprised that he wasn't nervous. Elegant posture, expensive clothes, but eyes nothing like her arrogant fiancé's. "Yes, my name's Clara." She looked at the car, the engine spread open in pieces. "I didn't know it was in this state." "The problem goes deeper than it looks," Raphael said, tightening a part. "And the deadline's short. Your fiancé gave me 24 hours. "He did that?" she asked, shocked. "But why?" Raphael gave a humorless smile. "To prove that a working man can't fix what suit-wearing engineers couldn't understand." Clara watched him silently. The way he handled the tools, the focus in his eyes, the calm of someone who carried the world's weight but still believed in his craft. "And are you going to try?" she asked. "No," he replied firmly. "I'm going to succeed." She studied him for a moment, then murmured, "Be careful. Eduardo doesn't like being challenged." "Neither do I," Raphael said, fitting a gear with precision. Clara left. The echo of her heels faded on the wet street. Silence returned, cut only by the ticking clock on the wall. The next hours were a duel. Raphael held the flashlight between his teeth, taking apart the lower section of the engine. Grease covered his arms. Sweat rolled down his forehead. Outside, the storm came back. The roof dripped onto the floor, forming small puddles. The clock showed 3 a.m. His body begged for rest, but his mind refused. The memory of Eduardo's laughter kept him awake. Every time the engine failed, he heard that laugh again, mocking his shop, his clothes, his life. 24 hours, he repeated in his head like a mantra. David, the apprentice, slept in a corner under an old blanket. Raphael worked alone until the strong wind slammed the gate. The loud bang startled him. He looked around and saw rain beginning to drift inside. He grabbed a bucket, a rag, and pulled a tarp over the engine, protecting it as if guarding a life. The light flickered, then went out. The power on the street had failed. The shop sank into darkness. Raphael took a deep breath and switched on a portable flashlight. The battery was weak, the beam trembling. Even so, he kept working. "I'm not fixing an engine. I'm fixing my dignity." The words slipped from his mouth, quiet but steady. He began checking the injection system manually, wire by wire, like someone stitching his own fate. The rain outside had become his metronome. The air smelled of metal and stubbornness. While turning a torque wrench, his mind drifted back to the past. He remembered the night he was fired, the cold room. Eduardo's face saying, "The problem is, you're too good to stay quiet." And he finally understood. The engine before him was his chance to close that chapter. Around 5 in the morning, the power came back. The fans spun with a tired hum, and the lights flickered weakly. Davy woke up startled. "It's morning already." "Not yet," Raphael said. "But the engine's almost there." He tested the circuit. Something sparked. The burning smell made him jump back. A wire had melted. "Damn it," he muttered. Time was slipping away. Eduardo would return before the day was over, and any mistake would mean public humiliation. But Raphael didn't quit. He cut the burnt wire, replaced it, redid the solder. The sound of melting tin felt like a promise. When the first ray of sunlight slipped through the gate's crack, he looked at the clock. 8 hours left. The engine was assembled but silent. He turned the key. Nothing. Davy bit his lip. "We're running out of time, Rafa. Time's a luxury for people who've never lost anything." He turned the key again. "And I don't have that luxury." Silence. Raphael crouched, pressed his ear against the engine. "It's here," he whispered. A faint noise, a tick inside the head. He opened it again without hesitation. His hands trembled, but his eyes knew what to seek. He found it. A micro crack in the seal, almost invisible. He replaced it, adjusted everything, and before closing it up again, looked at the car with a grave expression. "If you don't start now, it's not just the car that breaks. It's what's left of me." He turned the key. The engine coughed once, then again. A hesitant growl, then steady, smooth, alive. The sound filled the garage. Davy threw his arms up. "It worked!" Raphael closed his eyes and just listened. The engine pulsed like a heart brought back to life, but he didn't smile. He knew it wasn't over. He knew Eduardo would return and bring more than arrogance. The challenge was won, but the war was only beginning. The sound of the engine was still echoing when Clara returned the next morning. The sky was clear, the ground still wet, and the garage smelled like victory mixed with reheated coffee. Davy was sweeping the floor, humming, while Raphael adjusted the final details. When she stepped in, she stopped in the doorway, surprised by the scene. The Mercedes, which just yesterday had been a symbol of broken pride, now purred softly, as if it had just rolled out of the factory. "You did it," she said, almost whispering. Raphael looked up, tired, but with a calm that came from within. "I did, but the problem wasn't mechanical. It was human." She stepped closer, her heels tapping slowly on the concrete. "What do you mean?" Raphael pointed to a small piece on the workbench. A damaged valve. Someone sabotaged the ignition system. "It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate." Clara took the part in her hands, turning it under the light. "That's serious." "It is, but the people who should care will probably pretend they didn't see it," he said, wiping his hands with a rag. Clara studied his face for a few seconds. There was something about that man, steadiness without arrogance, anger without hate, a rare kind of strength. "You don't seem like an ordinary mechanic," she said. "Did you ever work for a big company?" Raphael hesitated. "Yeah, a long time ago." "Which one?" she asked, curious. "Montero Motors." He looked at her for a moment, gauging her reaction, "until I exposed a fraud and got blamed for it." Clara blinked, stunned. "Montero Motors? But that's your fiancé's company," Raphael finished dryly. The silence fell heavy, like a hammer. Clara stepped back, glancing at the car, then at him. "You're saying Eduardo wronged you?" Raphael exhaled slowly. "I'm saying I did the right thing, and paid for it." Clara set the part down and crossed her arms. "If what you're saying is true, he needs to hear it." Raphael smiled faintly without sarcasm. He already did. He just didn't care. She fell silent, processing it all. The perfect image she had of Eduardo was starting to crack. "He always told me he was the one who exposed the corruption in his old company," she murmured. Raphael gave a short laugh. "Yeah, truth tends to change owners, depending on who's telling the story." The wind blew through the door, carrying the smell of oil and dust. Clara wandered through the garage, looking at the old tools, the faded posters of classic cars, the simplicity of the place. "And after everything, you still fix engines?" "I fix what I can," he replied. "And not just for money. Every engine has a way of speaking. When it stops, it's like it's asking to be heard. And I listen." Clara watched him, moved. It was strange. The more he spoke, the more she felt a mix of respect and admiration she couldn't explain. "Eduardo never talks like that," Clara said out loud. "To him, everything is about numbers, goals, profit." Raphael wiped his hands, not looking at her. "And what he doesn't get is that profit only comes when work has a soul." "You talk like someone who's lost a lot." "I have," he admitted. "But I've learned that what you do with what you've lost is what defines you." For a moment the silence was light, almost peaceful. Then the sound of tires broke it. A silver car pulled up outside. Clara glanced through the window. It's him. Raphael pressed his lips together. Eduardo stepped out, accompanied by the same engineer from the other night and the bodyguard. His watch gleamed under the sun. "Hope you've got good news, mechanic," the CEO said, walking in without knocking. Raphael crossed his arms. "The car's ready." Eduardo smirked. "So the miracle worker met his deadline." Clara stepped forward. "Eduardo, he fixed the car, and more. He found signs of sabotage." Eduardo's face tightened. "Sabotage? That's ridiculous." Raphael pointed at the piece on the bench. "Right there, clean-cut, altered circuit." Eduardo looked at the part, then at Clara. "And you believe him, a man who works in a place like this?" "I believe facts," she replied. "And he's got evidence." Eduardo laughed, but it came out strained. "Evidence? You mean that dirty piece of junk? Clara, don't let yourself be fooled. Guys like this make up stories to squeeze money." Raphael stayed calm. "I don't want your money. I just want you to understand what pride does to a man. It makes him blind." Eduardo stepped closer. "You calling me blind, mechanic?" "No," Raphael said steadily. "I'm saying that whoever refuses to see the truth eventually trips over it." "Eduardo, stop!" Clara cut in, but the CEO ignored her. "Listen here, grease trash. You might have made this car run, but you'll never rise above the dirt you came from." The silence grew heavy. David stopped sweeping. Mrs. Odette, watching from the sidewalk, covered her mouth. Raphael stared right at Eduardo. "The dirt teaches me what your polished shoes forget, where everything begins." Eduardo's face flushed red. 24 hours are up. Let's see if your miracle lasts longer than your courage." He turned, opened the Mercedes door, and sat inside. The engine roared, flawless, smooth. But on Eduardo's face, that sound looked like an insult. Clara stood still, torn between the man she thought she knew and the man she had just discovered. Before leaving, she looked at Raphael and whispered, "This isn't over." He nodded, watching the car fade down the street. "I know. Filth always returns when it rains." And right then, a dark cloud crept across the sky again. The storm wasn't over. The clock on the wall showed 11 a.m. when the Mercedes came back to the shop. Same car, same engine, but the air was different. No laughter, no jokes. Just tension, thick as gasoline, ready to ignite. The engine ran perfectly, and somehow that irritated Eduardo. He stepped out, fists clenched, his smile stiff. Clara followed quietly, her gaze sharp, not the same as last night's. "So that's it," the CEO began, voice dripping with irony. "The car works, and now you want a trophy?" Raphael wiped his hands, unfazed. "I don't want a trophy. I want you to understand what you've done." Eduardo scoffed. "I did you a favor, gave a fancy toy for a mechanic to play with." Clara spoke calmly. "Eduardo, he found sabotage. This part," she lifted the damaged valve, "someone tampered with it." Eduardo faked surprise. "How convenient, huh? The mechanic finds an error and, look at that, gets attention." Raphael stepped closer. "I don't want attention, I want justice." "Justice?" Eduardo laughed loudly. "Justice is something you buy, my friend. Welcome to the real world." Raphael stared straight at him. "No, justice is something you build, piece by piece. Just like an engine." For a moment, Clara noticed something in Raphael's eyes, a steadiness she had never seen in Eduardo's, the kind of strength that doesn't need wealth to have power. Eduardo sensed the silence between them and took it as a threat. "Clara, don't tell me you're falling for this honest worker act," she answered without hesitation. "I believe the one who tells the truth without needing a microphone." Eduardo swallowed hard. To hide it, he called to his engineer. "Lucas! Run a quick inspection. Let's see if this guy's miracle can handle a real scanner." The engineer hooked the diagnostic tool to the car and started the test. The screen flashed green, no errors detected. Raphael watched calmly from a distance. "Incredible," the engineer muttered, scratching his head. "All parameters are perfect. Torque, compression, injection, everything recalibrated." Eduardo forced a grin. "Guess he got lucky." Raphael stepped forward and replied firmly, "Luck is what arrogant people call hard work they can't understand." The engineer looked at him with respect. "Mind if I ask exactly what you did?" Raphael explained patiently, pointing out the areas he adjusted, the errors he corrected, the hidden flaws he'd found. The man nodded, impressed. "This is brilliant. Whoever assembled it before clearly meant to sabotage it." The control module had a deliberate delay in the ignition signal. Clara lifted her gaze toward Eduardo. "You heard that?" Eduardo pretended not to understand. "Nonsense. These technical guesses—" "They're not guesses," the engineer interrupted. "I've got the data. It was done on purpose." The silence turned heavy. The bodyguard, who hadn't moved until then, glanced at his boss. Eduardo ran a hand through his hair, trying to look composed. "You suggesting what, kid? That I ordered this?" Raphael didn't answer right away. He simply walked over and turned off the engine. The sound stopped, leaving only the faint hum of the street outside. "I don't need to suggest anything," he said, staring directly at Eduardo. "Because the engine talks, and it told me everything." Eduardo smirked, but it was the kind of smile fear wears when it tries to hide. "Beautiful poetry. What's next? A book about humility?" Raphael shrugged. "Maybe." Title: "The Man Who Tried to Destroy an Engine, but Ended Up Destroying His Own Reputation." Davi, the apprentice, couldn't hold back a small laugh. Eduardo shot him a murderous glare. Clara, her face serious, stepped closer to Raphael. "Can you prove it?" He nodded. "I've got photos, reports, and the serial numbers of the tampered parts. I can take it to Montero Motors Board myself." Eduardo snapped. "You won't do a damn thing." "I won't need to," Raphael said calmly. "The truth will." Clara looked him in the eye. "Send everything to me. I want to see it myself." Eduardo spun toward her, furious. "Clara, have you lost your mind? This man's manipulating you." She crossed her arms. "Manipulators are the ones who lie thinking the world revolves around their ego." The bodyguard stepped forward, but Clara stopped him with a single gesture. Raphael exhaled slowly. "You know, when I worked at your company, I thought machines were the most complicated part of a car. But now I know it's people. They break inside too, sometimes on purpose." Eduardo said nothing. There was no comeback for that. Clara kept her eyes on Raphael. "I want those files, and I want a copy of the report." "You'll have it," he said. Eduardo, pale and sweating, muttered something to the engineer and walked out. Clara watched him go without a word. Only when the engine noise faded down the street did she speak again. "He always said you were the traitor." Raphael wiped his hands. "That's what traitors do, point fingers before someone points at them." For a moment, the silence was softer. Clara looked at the car, now running flawlessly, and back at him. "You know this won't end here, right?" "I know," Raphael said. "But I also know the truth's like a well-built engine. It might take a while to start, but once it runs, no one can stop it." Clara smiled for the first time without guilt. "Then let's keep it running." The wind blew through the open door, lifting a dirty rag off the floor. Davi leaned against the wall, exhausted and in awe. The engine, now silent, seemed to hold within it the sound of something greater than steel and fuel, the sound of a turning point. And Raphael knew what had started as humiliation was now a battle of reputations, but this time he also knew it wouldn't be the poor mechanic left with dirty hands. The sun was already setting when Raphael shut the garage doors. The street was growing quiet, the smell of burnt oil mixing with fresh bread from the corner bakery, but inside him there was no peace. He knew messing with powerful people had a price, and Eduardo Montero wasn't the kind of man who accepted losing, let alone being exposed by someone he considered beneath him. Raphael leaned against the workbench, staring at the photos he'd taken of the engine, the altered part, the swapped wires, the irregular serial number. Everything was there, saved on a flash drive attached to his keychain. But something inside told him that wasn't enough. The truth needed a stage. The sound of a car pulling up outside broke his thoughts. It was Clara. She stepped out quickly, hair loose, face tense. She entered without knocking, clutching her phone tightly. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice trembling. "Eduardo tried to fool me." Raphael frowned. "What happened?" She set the phone on the workbench. "This afternoon he called me to a meeting at the company, said he wanted to explain everything. But the moment I walked in, I realized it was a setup. 2 lawyers were there. He showed me a contract claiming you blackmailed me, that you tried to sell fake information about Montero Motors." Raphael stepped back. "He forged that." "Yes," Clara nodded. "And he even recorded a fake video, pretending you asked for money to keep quiet. I saw it. A total fabrication." Raphael took a deep breath. "So that's how he plays." Clara moved closer. "I didn't know he'd go that far. But now I see everything clearly." She opened her phone and played a secret recording. Eduardo arguing with the engineer, his voice breaking. "You should have done a better job, Lucas. That bastard found the connector. If this reaches the board, we're finished." Eduardo shouted, furious. Raphael listened without blinking. Every word was a confession, a clean hit, but deadly. Clara stopped the recording. "I caught it when he lost control. If this goes public, he's done." Raphael stayed silent for a few seconds. A dog barking outside filled the pause. "Do you have any idea what's going to happen if this gets out?" he asked quietly. "She'll try to destroy me too," Clara said firmly. "But someone has to stop that man." Raphael looked her in the eyes. "Why are you doing this?" She hesitated, then answered honestly, "Because I've seen who he really is, and I've seen who you are. You're opposites." Raphael looked away, uncomfortable. "I'm no hero, Clara. I just never learned how to bow. And that's exactly why he hates you," she said. "People like Eduardo can't stand anyone who doesn't kneel." Raphael pulled the flash drive from his keychain and set it beside her phone. "The technical evidence is here. Combine it with the video. Take it to the board first thing in the morning." "And you?" she asked. "Me?" He gave a tired half smile. "I'll do what I've always done. Keep working." But before they could say more, they heard quick footsteps outside. Davi burst through the back door, panting. "Rafa, 2 guys were asking for you at the corner. One's got a black car, tinted windows." Clara's face went pale. "They're Eduardo's security men." Raphael locked the door and killed the lights. "He wants the video." "So he knows I recorded it," she whispered. "Probably." Raphael looked around quickly. "We'll go out the back." They crossed the narrow corridor of the garage, the sound of boots echoing outside. The side gate led to a dark alley. Clara clutched her phone with both hands. "If they get the video, it's over," she said. Raphael opened the gate slowly and peeked outside. Nothing. "Go. Head to your sister's place. Don't answer anyone. And you? I'll buy us some time." "Raphael, he's dangerous." He gave her a crooked smile. "Danger's just fear wearing a suit." Clara hesitated, then obeyed. She disappeared into the dark street, leaving a faint scent of perfume behind. Minutes later, the front door burst open. 2 men stepped in with flashlights. "Where is he?" one of them shouted. Raphael emerged from behind them, holding a metal bar. "Right here." One lunged at him, but Raphael dodged and shoved him into a pile of tires. The other tried to grab him, but slipped on the wet floor. "The boss wants the video," the first yelled, trying to stand. "Then the boss will have to watch it on TV," Raphael replied, slamming the bar against the floor, the metallic echo filling the garage. The men backed off and fled. Raphael stood there, breathing hard, heart pounding. He knew the worst was still coming. The next morning, Clara walked into Montero Motors headquarters with the video in her hand. She entered the boardroom, interrupting a meeting. The executives turned, startled. "I've got something you need to see," she said, setting her phone on the table. Eduardo's recorded voice filled the room. "That bastard found the connector. If this gets to the board, we're finished." The silence was absolute. The directors exchanged stunned looks. One of them paused the video and asked, "Clara, is this authentic?" "Completely," she said. "And there's more. These are the photos and technical reports from the mechanic who uncovered the sabotage." The board chairman took a deep breath. "This is serious." Eduardo burst into the room seconds later, pale. "What's going on here?" The director pointed to the frozen video frame. "That's what we'd like to know." Eduardo tried to deny it, but his voice faltered. It's edited, manipulated. Clara stared at him calmly. Just like the fake one you tried to use against Raphael. He froze. The board demanded he step down immediately, pending investigation, and for the first time, Eduardo Montero had nothing left to say. Meanwhile, back at the garage, Raphael mopped the floor and turned on the old radio. The news had already broken. Scandal at Montero Motors, CEO removed after internal fraud and sabotage allegations. He smiled, not celebrating, just breathing lighter. Truth hadn't made him rich, but it gave him something money could never buy. The peace of someone who won without getting dirty. The story spread like wildfire. By morning, every headline screamed, Montero Motors CEO removed after luxury car sabotage scandal. TV stations replayed Clara's recording on a loop. Eduardo's angry voice echoed through living rooms and offices across the country. That bastard found the connector. If this reaches the board, we're finished. The line had become a meme, a headline, a national embarrassment. At the garage, Raphael sipped his coffee quietly on the doorstep. The old radio crackled with the news. Investigations confirm the CEO's role in concealing defects in new models. He sighed, not with joy but relief. Davy appeared, phone in hand. Rafa, you're all over the internet, he said excitedly. Everyone's talking. The mechanic who exposed the millionaire. Raphael chuckled. Let them talk. The internet gets excited fast and forgets even faster. But Davy insisted. No, check this out. They want interviews, TV, newspapers, even car magazines. Raphael shook his head. I don't want fame, Davy. I want peace. The apprentice smiled in awe. You're different, man. Anyone else would be selling the story to a podcast by now. Yeah, Raphael said. But anyone who trades truth for fame ends up lying about their own victory. Before they could say more, a black car pulled up outside the garage. For a split second, Raphael's heart raced, that old instinctive fear returning. This time, the door opened, and it was Clara. No security, no corporate makeup, just her, simple, calm, free. Thought you wouldn't recognize me without the heels, she said, smiling softly. Raphael replied with quiet irony. I recognize people who walk with their heads held high. She stepped into the garage, her eyes wandering around, the radio, the tools, the engine on the bench, the same black Mercedes, now resting under a blue tarp. The press is looking for you, she said. And the board, too, they want you to come in. For what? He asked. I've already done what needed doing. They want to hear you, she said, and maybe offer you something. Raphael looked at her, suspicious. Offers from powerful people usually come with hidden price tags. Clara almost laughed. Not all of them. And Eduardo? He asked bluntly. Her expression grew more serious. He's under investigation for fraud and falsified reports. He was officially suspended this morning. Montero Motors released a statement confirming everything. Raphael looked down, thoughtful. Funny. The man who called me a grease-stained nobody is now on the front page for getting his hands dirty. Clara crossed her arms. Life has a strange way of balancing the scales, doesn't it? Yeah. He smiled faintly, but his eyes were heavy. I just wish my father had seen this. He used to say, a man who works right doesn't need to explain himself. Time does it for him. Clara stayed quiet, watching him. There was a kind of greatness in him that couldn't be bought, only earned. You should go, she said softly. Not for them, for yourself. Raphael took a long breath. All right, but I'm not promising a tie. Hours later, he walked through the doors of Montero Motors for the first time in years. The same shiny floors, the same cold walls. But now every look was different, some filled with respect, others with shame. Inside the boardroom sat the same men who had once signed his termination, and at the head of the table, in Eduardo's old chair, was Clara. She was now the interim CEO. Raphael, said one of the senior directors, we owe you an apology, and much more. Raphael stood, humble but firm. Apology accepted. The rest isn't needed. You saved the company's image, the man continued, And from what we can tell, you prevented a disaster. We'd like you to come back." Raphael raised an eyebrow. "Come back?" Clara spoke up. "As chief quality consultant, full freedom, your own team." He paused, looking around. Memories hit like waves. The meetings, the humiliation, the unfair firing. And now those same people offered him a red carpet. "Funny," he said. "I spent years trying to forget this place. And now it wants to remind me I was right." One of the directors tried to justify. "We all make mistakes, Raphael." "Yes," he replied, "but not everyone has the courage to fix them." Clara smiled faintly. "You always did." He took another breath. "I'll accept, on one condition." "What's that?" she asked. "I keep my garage. That's where I remember who I am." She nodded. "It stays yours. And from now on, it'll be an official Montero Motors service partner." The silence broke with soft applause. Raphael didn't get emotional, but for a brief second, his eyes shone. Outside, the press was waiting. As he stepped out, surrounded by cameras and microphones, a reporter asked, "Raphael, what do you have to say about everything that happened?" He paused, thought for a moment, and answered calmly, "There's no such thing as an impossible engine. Only mechanics who give up too soon." The crowd clapped, and for a brief moment, the humble mechanic became a national symbol of integrity. But as the flashes went off, Raphael looked at Clara, and she looked back. No words. Just that silent understanding between two people who knew that something far stronger had begun. And in that moment, he understood. The real victory wasn't taking down the powerful. It was staying whole after their fall. The following days were a whirlwind. The story of the mechanic who exposed the CEO spread across every TV channel, blog, and newspaper. Influencers called it a lesson in ethics and courage. Ordinary people stopped Raphael on the street, shook his hand, asked for photos. But he hadn't changed. He still woke up early, drank the same bitter coffee, put on the same blue jumpsuit, and opened the same garage. Now freshly painted, with a new sign, "Rafa Motors, we fix what others give up on." Clients came from every corner of the city. Luxury cars, pickup trucks, old motorcycles. Rich and poor stood in the same line, all wanting him to handle their engines. Davi, the apprentice, struggled to keep up. "Rafa, the phone won't stop ringing." "Even reporters are calling again." Raphael laughed, shaking his head. "The world loves a hero, Davi, but heroes are just tired people who didn't quit." On the radio, news about Montero Motors still filled the airwaves. Eduardo Montero was facing charges, and the engineer had confessed to sabotage in exchange for a lighter sentence. And Clara was now officially the new CEO. She visited the garage from time to time, not as a boss, but as a friend. And every time she did, the air shifted just a little. The way she looked at him wasn't like she was seeing a mechanic, but a man who'd stayed whole when everything tried to break him. Even Davi had noticed. "You ever realize the wind changes when she shows up?" he joked. Raphael pretended not to hear. "Get back to work, kid." But it was true. The wind really did change. One afternoon, Clara arrived again. No car, no security, just wearing simple clothes. "I came to return something," she said, showing him a small flash drive, the same one he'd given her that night. Raphael took it, surprised. "I thought the company would have kept this in their archives." "I kept a copy," she said. "This one's yours. It's part of your story." He looked down at the tiny piece of metal. It was light but carried the weight of a lifetime. "I don't keep memories, only tools," he said quietly. Clara smiled. "Then keep it as one. A tool for justice." They stood in silence for a few seconds, the fan humming between them. "You know," she said softly, "you could be anywhere right now. Leading a team, winning awards, traveling the world." Raphael answered calmly, "What I've got here is everything I ever wanted. Peace, purpose, and an engine to listen to." Clara's gaze softened, almost emotional. "That's why you won, Raphael. Because you never chased the spotlight, only the truth." He looked away, shy. Spotlight blinds, truth doesn't. Later that day, a van pulled up outside the garage, a TV crew. "Mr. Raphael, "We'd love to do a report about you," one said. "Show the world how a simple mechanic changed the course of a major company." Raphael took a deep breath. "You can film, but only if you include Davy, Mrs. Odette, and the whole neighborhood." "But the audience wants you," the reporter insisted. "The audience wants a story. I want them to remember the people who stayed when the world laughed at us." The reporter hesitated, then nodded. The piece aired days later, not just about the hero, but the entire community. The footage showed children laughing, engines being repaired, and Raphael saying to the camera, "The garage is mine, but the credit belongs to everyone who still believes honesty can be fixed." The line went viral, and even those who'd never held a wrench understood the message. A few days later, Clara returned again, holding a folder. "Official documents," she said. "The board approved it. You're the new chief quality consultant for Montero Motors." Raphael's eyes widened. "But I said I wanted to stay here." "And you will," she smiled. "The company's funding your garage and turning it into a training center. Young mechanics will learn from you." For a moment he couldn't speak. The same man once fired for exposing corruption was now being honored as an example of ethics for a new generation. "Why are you doing this, Clara?" he asked. "You don't owe me anything." "It's not gratitude, Raphael. It's recognition." She stepped closer. "And honestly, I wish I'd met the man you were before all this." "And who do you think I am now?" he asked, a bit awkwardly. Clara smiled. "The same man, only now the world finally sees him." A silence full of meaning filled the air. They looked at each other for a few long seconds, just enough to understand what words didn't need to say. By sunset, Raphael closed the garage and watched the light reflect off the Mercedes hood, the same car that had started it all. The wind was gentle, and the sounds of the neighborhood blended with the hum of cicadas. Davy leaned against the door. "So, boss, is it over?" Raphael thought for a moment. "Over?" He smiled. "No, it just started again, the right way." And as the city lights flickered on, he understood something simple and profound. It wasn't the engine he had fixed, it was his own fate. Because sometimes life works like that. It breaks you, just to show you where your real strength comes from. The following week began with the clang of tools and laughter. The once quiet garage was now full of life, a meeting point. Young apprentices came from all over to learn from the mechanic who defied the impossible. Montero Motors had made it official, and a new sign gleamed on the front wall. Rafa Motors Technical Center, Automotive Excellence Training. Raphael never got used to the title. When people called him Professor, he'd laugh. "I don't really teach," he'd say. "I just show people how to listen to what machines are trying to say." But the students admired him. Every phrase became a lesson, every gesture an example. He taught more about character than mechanics. "An engine never lies," he'd tell them, "but the man who fixes it can choose to." Davy, now his right hand, ran the training team. The old garage had become a vibrant space, and deep down a symbol of rebirth. One Friday morning, a sleek black car stopped in front of the shop. It bore the Montero Motors logo on the side. Clara stepped out. She wore a simple blazer and a calm smile, carrying a leather folder and the kind of look that said she had something important to say. Raphael saw her through the window and sighed. "Here comes trouble disguised as a visit." She walked in, and everyone paused. "The boss is here," Davy yelled playfully. Clara laughed. "I'm not his boss. At best, his student." Raphael smirked. "Last time you said that, the company nearly collapsed from embarrassment." She came closer. "Yeah, and you almost became a legend." She set the folder down on the workbench. "But today's different. I came with a proposal." Raphael raised an eyebrow. "A proposal? I'm buried in contracts already." "It's not professional," she said, a spark in her eyes. "It's personal." Davy caught the mood and whispered, "Yeah, I should probably not be here for this," then vanished out the back door. Clara opened the folder. Inside was a document, the company's new project, Sustainable Innovation Program, Rafael Montero, Global Quality Director. He glanced at it and shook his head. "No, You're not even going to read it? She asked, surprised. I already did, he said, pointing to his own name. That's all I needed. I don't want it. Clara stepped closer. It's not about vanity. It's about purpose. The world needs to see that Montero Motors has changed, and you're proof of that. Raphael met her gaze. Symbols don't fix anything, Clara. People do. And I prefer my hands covered in grease, not ink. She sighed, thinking. Then what if I told you this proposal has another part? Raphael crossed his arms. Here we go. Clara smiled, a bit nervous. Remember what Eduardo said that night? If you fix this engine, I'll marry you. Raphael let out a short laugh. How could I forget? That was the most expensive insult of my life. Right, she said, looking him straight in the eye. So what if I said the same thing, but meant it? The silence that followed felt alive. Raphael stopped smiling. What? If you fix this engine, she said, pointing to her chest, I'll marry you. He froze. For a moment, the shop disappeared. No sound, no air, only the thumping of his own heart. Clara, he started, but she gently cut him off. I know you hate drama, so I'll keep it simple. Since that night I saw you here, covered in grease and dignity, I understood what respect really means. You showed me that wealth isn't what you wear, it's what you carry inside. Raphael looked down, shy, and I saw you stand up to the most powerful man in your life just to do the right thing. He paused. Guess we fixed each other. Clara took a step closer. Then don't run now. He looked around. The tools, the oil, the smell of metal, everything told him the world was right again. I'm not running, he said softly. I've just learned to take my time believing when things get too good. Clara smiled. Then believe slowly. I'll wait. She held out her hand. Raphael took it, firm, steady, unhurried. From the back, Davy peeked in. So, should I tell everyone the wedding's happening here in the garage? He joked. Clara burst out laughing. Raphael replied, Sure, but you're polishing every car as your gift. The moment was light, almost poetic. Their laughter mixed with the metallic rhythm of the shop, the sound of two lives finally aligned. Weeks later, the photos began to circulate. Clara and Raphael side by side at the inauguration of the new Montero Motors Technical Center. She wore a simple white dress. He, a blue shirt, hands still stained with grease, no glamour, no poses. Just two worlds, power and labor, deciding to move forward together. As reporters shouted questions, Clara took the microphone and said, An engine only runs when every part works in harmony. The same goes for life. This man taught me that. Raphael added, and she taught me that sometimes the hardest engine to fix is the one in your heart. The crowd applauded. In the back, Mrs. Odette was crying, and Davy was filming it all, smiling. And when the flashes dimmed, Raphael looked at Clara. She leaned in and whispered, If you fix this engine, I'll marry you. He smiled. Guess that makes it official now. The engine of life at last was running in perfect sync. Time passed. Months after the scandal, the fall, and the wedding no one saw coming, Montero Motors rose from the ashes, but with a brand new soul. On the factory walls, a new phrase was etched in steel, chosen by Clara. Greatness isn't about who commands, but about who does the right thing when no one's watching. And next to it, the name of the man who inspired that change, Rafael Montero. But Raphael himself hadn't changed. He still woke early, drank his black coffee, and opened the garage doors. Now also a school. The same jumpsuit, the same grease-stained hands, but a calmer look from someone who'd finally repaired the engine of his own soul. The chatter of young apprentices filled the space, and Raphael smiled. Hey, boss! Davy, now the training coordinator, shouted, City Hall's car is here for inspection. Raphael didn't look up. Tell them to wait. Anything urgent usually goes wrong. Davy laughed. You sound just like my dad, you know that? Then your dad's a wise man, Raphael said, tightening a bolt. Sunlight poured through the windows, glinting off polished tools. The shop, once a symbol of struggle and solitude, now overflowed with learning, purpose, and respect. And for Raphael, that was the truest victory of all. On TV, Clara appeared in interviews, speaking about ethics and rebuilding trust. But when the cameras turned off, she went home, kicked off her heels and sat with Raphael on the porch. There, far from the noise and the lights, their love stayed simple, the same one that had begun in Greece, thunder and rain. "You notice it?" she asked one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky orange. "The whole city sees you as an example." Raphael smiled softly. "Example of what?" "That it's still possible to win by being honest." He looked toward the horizon. "I'm no example, Clara. I just refuse to accept what was wrong long enough." She rested her head on his shoulder. "And that's exactly why the world listens to you." From the distance came the low sound of an engine. Raphael stood up, curious. "What's that now?" Two young mechanics climbed down from an old, restored pickup truck. One of them shouted, "Boss! We finished the school's car! The engine's perfect!" Raphael smiled. So the impossible became routine, and he went down to greet the boys. Clara watched from the porch, proud. The man who had once been humiliated, doubted, and called a grease-stained nobody was now shaping futures, quietly, without speeches, without pride, just by example. Later that night, alone in the shop, Raphael walked toward the car that had started it all, the black Mercedes, now completely restored. The same car that had once arrived broken, symbol of arrogance, now stood there gleaming, preserved like a relic. He opened the hood, looked at the engine, and whispered as if talking to an old friend. "You remember, don't you? This is where it all began." He ran his hand over the metal, no anger anymore, no pain, just gratitude. Every scratch on that car told a story. The night of humiliation, the challenge, the silence, the first roar of the engine, the fall of the man who had mocked him. It was all there, and he didn't want to erase it. "Life's like an engine," he said quietly. "When something breaks, it's not the end. It's just a sign that you need to look closer." One of the apprentices, hearing from a distance, asked, "You talking to the car again, boss?" Raphael smiled. "Always. It understands me better than most people." The boy laughed, not really getting it, and went back to work. Raphael stayed there for a moment longer in silence. Then he turned off the lights and locked the door. That same night, an event brought together entrepreneurs, engineers, and politicians. The theme, ethics and innovation in the future of industry. Clara walked up to the stage to speak, but before her speech, she announced a surprise. "Tonight," she said, "I want to introduce someone who taught me the real meaning of the word reconstruction." She turned toward the side of the stage. "Please welcome Rafael Montero." The crowd rose to their feet, applauding. Rafael walked slowly, uncomfortable with the formality but calm. He took the microphone and began, "I'm not a speaker or a politician. I'm a mechanic, and maybe that's enough. Because everything I've learned about ethics, I learned from an engine." The audience went completely silent. An engine is made of different parts, and it only works when every piece does its job. If one part decides to cheat, the whole system fails. A company is the same. So is life. You can't lie and expect the engine of your conscience to keep running. He paused. Everyone listened. "I've learned that real success isn't about rising. It's about not falling when no one's watching. And humility isn't about bowing down. It's about standing firm, even when the world tries to crush you." He glanced toward Clara, who was smiling in the audience. "And finally," he continued, "I discovered something simple. Those who work with their hands fix machines, but those who work with their hearts fix lives. Mine was fixed right here, and today the sound of an engine coming back to life. That's my favorite song." The entire theater stood and applauded. Raphael didn't bow, just nodded quietly. He didn't need a stage. His victory lived in the workshop floor, in the hands of his students, and in Clara's eyes. Later, walking home, he and Clara stopped outside the garage, lit by the warm glow of a streetlight. The night wind stirred the new sign above the door, and somewhere in the distance, an engine hummed. "Do you still hear that sound with the same feeling?" she asked. Raphael smiled. "It sounds different now, It used to be noise from the fight. Now it's peace. She held his hand. You know, sometimes I think fate was just waiting for the right moment to bring us together. Or maybe fate just needed an engine running to keep turning, he said with a laugh. Clara rested her head on his shoulder. And you still think you're not a hero? Raphael looked at the sky and answered simply, a hero is just someone who keeps standing every time the world tries to break their faith. I only did what everyone should do. Never give up on being fair. She looked at him tenderly. Then, let the whole world learn that. He smiled, squeezed her hand, and before they went inside, looked once more at the Mercedes shining under the streetlights. See that, Clara? He said. In the end, I fixed the engine, and the engine fixed us. The wind blew gently, carrying with it the sound of a distant engine, as if the universe itself agreed. And as the lights of the workshop went out, one final thought lingered in the air, like an echo and a lesson. Life will test your character the same way time tests an engine, through pressure, heat, and noise. But if you're built from honesty, you'll keep running, even after everything.